Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Ammon's Bogus Hangout. We've got a small panel of SEO experts here with us today already. Doc Sheldon. Doc, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to for the next week or so? It's here with us today already. Doc Sheldon. Doc, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to for the next week or so? It's here with us today already. Doc Sheldon. Doc, would you like to say hello?
You got another tab open, Bill.
I was trying to close them.
You've got 178 tabs open, right?
Yeah.
Been there.
Little bit of a time loop there, sorry.
Anyway, Doc Sheldon, Intrinsic Value SEO and Search News Central. I work in technical SEO primarily. And the last few days I've been digging into a lot on GDPR because I'm doing a couple sessions here. One this Friday with John Carkett and Brasco on Webmaster, and then one about the middle of the month. And I've also been trying to get off my butt and get my book published. I finally decided how I'm going to do it and dig into the different avenues for it. I finally decided I am going to self-publish. I'm going to stay away from the publishing houses. So I found that's a real bag of worms from a legal standpoint, because you go to someplace like CreateSpace, they'll give you a free ISBN number, but then they own it all in perpetuity. And if they decide not to do something in UK, or they decide not to do an audio book, you can't ever. So I'm going to have to buy my own ISBN number, which is, $125, no big deal, but I didn't realize all that. So it's turning into a lot of interesting discoveries. And that's probably going to keep me busy for the next week or so.
Doesn't sound like fun. Hi, Terry. How are you? Just introduce yourself and tell us something about what you're up to for next week.
Terry Van Horn, SEO Pros, SEO Training Dojo, and I have a web development company as well. This week, I'll be working on a few sites, trying to finish them up. Good thing I have a year to do the work, so I'm still not panicked yet. Let's see. But geez, Doc, I just was listening to you there. $125. You're a published author then, man. That's a big deal.
Well, yeah, it's not a big amount to pay. What I was interested in is finding out that I thought when you go to Amazon and use CreateSpace, they give you a free ISBN number because you have to have one to retail sell. And I thought that was part of the service. But what it is they're basically ripping ownership, all rights. If one of the, Sony comes to you and decides they want to make a movie out of your book, guess what? It ain't your call, and you don't get the royalties.
You know how the Library of Congress works, right?
Say again?
You know how the Library of Congress works, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have much of a library when they first started, and Thomas Jefferson donated a bunch of books to them, but the first librarian suggested that they introduce into the law a requirement that if you want a copyright, you had to send 2 copies of your books to the Library of Congress. So that's how they filled their shelves.
Dumb like a fox, eh? I didn't realize that. That's
a good story.
Actually, fairly brilliant.
Yeah. Amen. Fabrizio, hello.
Hello, hi guys. How you doing?
Good.
Oh, we have a matrix setup. What is Ammon is full on with the streaming, but you disappeared. Are you in the matrix at the moment?
Yeah. I'm in the middle of cooking still, so I'm looking backwards and forwards. I'm not worrying about the camera.
Which
Cool.
pill did you take?
How you doing, guys?
Good. Good. We're just going around, everybody saying hello, introducing themselves. Would you like to introduce yourself, Ammon?
Yeah.
We also lost him in the Matrix.
He's lost in the Matrix.
Yeah, anyway, maybe I can go. Last week we were down at Brighton, so not very productive week, but it was good to catch up with everyone. Ammon was there as well. There's actually a lot of people, and it was really packed. It was good event. Apart from the weather, that was terrible, but it was really good. Yeah, that was pretty much my week. We're still waiting for you, Bill, and you know, but I'm pretty confident sooner or later we'll.
Mm-hmm. Tim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Tim Calling. I'm the owner at Servant's Heart Web Design and Marketing. And I forget, I came in late. Are you asking us to say what we're working on or what we've been doing?
Give us an idea of what you're up to for next week or so.
For the next week or so, I'm actually wrapping up some client work so that next week I can be on vacation. So headed off to Catalina for several days.
Nice. I've been intending to go there sometime.
It's a lovely place. Now that you're a left coaster, you need to definitely go over there and sample Avalon, the only real city there. It's very nice.
You flying out or taking the ferry?
We're going to take the Catalina Express out of Long Beach. That's a good way to go. Fast, comfortable.
I saw there was a ferry out of Port Dana that was like $14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they go out of Dana Point. That particular company, Catalina Express, goes out of Dana Point, Long Beach, and San Pedro, and it's a pretty long drive out of Dana Point. A longer trip, in other words, and you get a slightly different experience coming back. You get a little bit more of a following sea, but the boats are really fast, so you don't really notice it too much.
Yeah.
But we're actually taking my parents who are in their 80s, and we're gonna go up the night before and stay over so that we don't have trouble with the early start. So we're gonna stay at a hotel in Long Beach and then head over. So
it's also it's a plus to avoid their airport.
Oh yeah, we've been talking about that on some other forum.
It's a hairy one.
Yeah, you've actually flown in and out of there. You said.
Yeah, in a little, I think it's like an 8-passenger thing. You know, it's an adrenaline pumper. I'm telling you.
I forget if it's there or Monterey where there was a plane crash years ago, and they just left the plane there. It's almost like a warning.
kind of like a sign on a wrecked car.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah, drive carefully. Yeah, it's a real scare coming in. Going out's not bad, but coming in there, it's like it really ought to be a viral YouTube video.
We actually went once by helicopter. That was nice, except that you were limited to 25 pounds of luggage per passenger. But on the other hand, you're going to an island resort. I mean, how much clothing do you need?
Well, especially for a day trip, it's
Yeah, it's almost nice just to go for a day, though.
Of course, the wife might bring back 150 pounds of goodies, even on a day trip. You never know.
That's why God invented shipping. So,
there you go.
Anyway, so that's what I'm up to, getting ready for vacation.
Well, it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I am Bill Slosky from SEO by the Sea and Go Fish Digital. I've been digging into lots of patents for the last week, including one I wrote about last week that was an update of PageRank patent. they're talking about how it now runs off a seed set of sites like TrustRank used to. Except it doesn't quite work the same way as TrustRank. There is a TrustRank patent that's owned by Yahoo, and they haven't given Google the rights to use TrustRank, but the old original PageRank patent expired last year. And that was owned by Stanford. So Google had produced a new version, a new variation of PageRank. They filed originally in 2006. And it was just granted as a continuation patent. They updated parts of it. Not in too many ways it seemed to make much of a difference. The trusted set of seed sites seems like something out of Majestic, the trust flow feature that they have. The seed sites they mentioned included New York Times and the Google directory. The Google directory's been gone for a long time, but they originally filed the patent in 2006. It was still running back then.
Now, is the Google directory the same as DMOZ?
Not exactly. It's all the DMOZ sites, but they're organized by PageRank. That was what made the Google directory different. Now that DMOZ is gone, the Google directory can't exist. They stopped showing that, I don't know,
A long time ago.
3-4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer.
I don't know if it's actually completely not visible anymore or removed, but nobody's really cared about it for a long time.
So like DMOZ itself.
But wasn't, as I recall, the Google directory was kind of based on DMOZ and Yahoo, and basically what they used to seed their search.
It was a DMOZ clone, except it was organized in its own way. So instead of ranking the pages in alphabetical order like DMOZ did, they listed them in terms of PageRank. The ones with the most PageRank were at the top, and the PageRank at the bottom.
The Open Directory used to make the entire database downloadable, if you remember, and Google was one of the people who downloaded it and did with it what they want, which was organise it by PageRank. Of course, now if it's a seed set for PageRank, it's kind of like setting it by itself. That might not work so well.
No, that might be a problem.
But we know that Google, the PageRank algorithm in the first place is all about the relationship between sites. So to an extent, just giving it a start position doesn't actually change the way it functions in a lot of ways, because it naturally functions that way. It naturally, used to put some sites in a very high position and some sites in a very low position by their connectivity, by their trust in the first place.
Well, it's fairly certain we're going to see an awful lot of conjecture and assumptions that are unfounded, or at least unsupportable.
Yeah.
Could be significant, though. It's interesting.
If you remember the original PageRank papers, they did suggest at that time that you could have the damping factor not be a number, but actually be a web domain. And they sort of gave, if I remember rightly, the Yahoo directory was given a nod as a potential, as one of the examples of that, and another was to give a particular professor's homepage and how that would change the nature of the way that PageRank would function.
it seems like many people these days believe that Google doesn't use PageRank anymore because they got rid of the toolbar.
Because of rank brain.
I'm still hearing very, very weird versions of what people think rank brain actually is. My closest explanation for it, the easy, simple, in a nutshell version, is just like I rewrite queries these days. You can rewrite which algorithm flavor you're returning results with. You know how some queries have, query demands freshness, or query demands diversity, where you want lots of different opinions or different media types. PageRank lets them shift which algorithm, which balance of algorithms they're using to better represent similar successful searches.
I think also like with the rise of tools that now claim on their home pages and things like that to be using artificial intelligence because of rank brain has increased as well. I was reading the other day a tool like that probably you could replicate with an Excel spreadsheet, and they had on their page on the feature like that this is AI powered. It's like, seriously. And then you speak with the reps and you ask them like, what kind of AI? And that's where it becomes fuzzy and it's really good.
Yeah. It's funny, everyone's talking about AI, but an actual general artificial intelligence is years away if it didn't come into fold.
Right. People are talking about AI as being a feature of crowdsourced click-throughs, and click-throughs determining the rankings of pages. And that's like saying most popular site wins, as if we should be getting news from the World Weekly News or the National Enquirer, as opposed to things like the New York Times or CNN.
Yeah. Really things that are based on just borrowing patterns without any original thought and not any kind of artificial intelligence whatsoever. There's got to be a decision-making process, not just an observation process.
Well, I do think that AI is going to, the development, the arriving at AI is going to happen a lot faster than we think. I don't know that I buy into it being several years out, because I think it's going to accelerate. At some point in time, somebody's going to be able to develop a system that will let the system look at its own development and improve its own development, and then it's going to accelerate exponentially.
As soon as AI starts making the decisions as to what has more value and has less value, yeah.
I think the seed set development, though, is going to be interesting, because it's definitely significant. It's be interesting to try to figure out what it means on a granular basis, or try to at least.
It's challenging trying to find a seed set.
Yeah.
The trust rank was based upon the idea that that good sites only link to other good sites,
Which is invalid, I think.
We're still nowhere near a computer that can pass the Turing test, and that's kind of become the basic benchmark for AI. is that, you know, a person needs to be able to speak to it and not work out it's a machine.
Microsoft had an AI that was interacting with people on Twitter, and
Yeah.
it turned out to be really racist. But I'm imagining it was acting as if it were a human being. You know, so maybe you can't distinguish that artificial intelligence from a human being under a Turing test, because it's possibly the way a human being would have reacted to some of the stuff that AI was going through on Twitter.
Be specific. People on Twitter, not people in general. People on Twitter.
Right.
Some correlation.
I'm sorry, Dave, but you cannot use that language here.
But like
Al.
Yeah, talking about non AI and you know, racism and other stuff, Zuckerberg just announced that by end of this year they're gonna have 20,000 content and security reviewers. So basically, you know, because of there's no algorithm that can fix what they want to do, they're just throwing people at it, which to me is even worse, actually, because basically, you know, they go from having like fake news and racism and all this stuff to having 20,000 people that control what you can say and what you can't.
So we transition to fake judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not really that different than what we've had for a long time.
Yeah, no, they just like
your own anyways, right? The search really reflects your own biases and whatnot. Like, you don't see stuff anymore that you would disagree with. Heaven, you know, that might offend somebody if they saw something that, you know, they didn't agree with.
Terry, you just don't understand that some pigs are more equal than others.
Yeah, right.
All the things that I read as a high school senior in all these books are coming true now. Animal Farm and
I was looking at the other day at this website that is selling robotic parts. Like the hospital are gonna turn into car shops where you go and tune your arm. You know, like it was so scary. Like they were literally selling it in a way that, you know, anyone could buy it. Like hopefully, you know, I have both arms still, but just in case, you know, I know that I can replace it now. Probably better, more resistant, and more functional. It's just a bit creepy. Yeah.
Like if they're bringing in a lot of content, you know, the people that look at the results, if they're bringing in more, that generally means they're going to do some sort of a big change, and they want to be able to check it out.
Supposedly during his 2 appearances before the Houses of Congress, what he said there was that they're going to be going to about 20,000 people, primarily to vet advertisers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's their main focus of this massive manpower boost is to vet.
Then the advertisers they're vetting are more than what's on AdWords.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, we're talking about Facebook ads. Yeah.
Well, probably everybody.
But like one thing that I don't get is I'm not really into the whole Facebook subject. But so if the problem is the ability of people of using advertising to manipulate election, right? Why don't they just turn them off, right? like to me, it seems a very like, so, you know, they're happy to take the money of candidates, pumping campaign money into that medium, but then at the same time they, you know, until that doesn't work in a way that it should work, maybe why putting people at it, right? I don't know.
Are you suggesting that politicians not be allowed to advertise on Facebook?
Oh, I just don't know. Like, it just seems to me that, like, you know, first you go out there and you give people a tool to kind of have. I'm not sure whether it actually has got any competitive advantage, but you give them a tool to play in that space, and then suddenly you become the one that says, hey, by the way, now I'm going to make a judgment on that. So basically, Zuckerberg doesn't have to run for president. He can just run Facebook and decide like what's going on, right? But versus like, it wouldn't it be more fair if they don't make a judgment on like what is, because then there would be people at Facebook deciding what is an okay political advertisement and what is not. What is okay fake news, right?
I don't think that they're pretending to judge what is an okay advertisement as much as they are who is an okay purchaser of an ad. So if it's somebody out of Bulgaria purporting to be a cousin to a presidential candidate, that's highly questionable, right? So they're not going to allow that ad. But what I think is, rather than saying, if you want to buy an ad for a political issue or candidate, we need to vet it before we will tell you whether we're going to allow you to run that ad. I think they should go ahead and redo their terms. You want to run an ad, put it in, pay for it. We're going to vet it. If we don't like it, then you've broken our terms and conditions, and it will not be refundable.
Yeah, I don't think they were ads that they used when they.
No,
there wasn't all ads, but there were an awful lot of accounts. There were an awful lot of bot accounts, of course, but there was also an awful lot of ads. In fact, a number was thrown out, something like $130-some million in ads that they had identified as fraudulent ads that should not have been allowed to run, based upon the fact that they were not, that they were politically oriented and they were not affiliated or legitimate supporters. Okay, they were fraudulent accounts. Okay, now the bots that are just getting in there as trolls and stirring up all kinds of nasty discussion, and then they are swaying a lot of people, and they're putting up fake news in Facebook posts. That's a real substantial one.
That's just stupid. If people are stupid enough to, that's how he got elected. People are that dumb.
Well, yeah.
And you do think that any rule that would actually rule out bots would probably rule out Donald Trump himself?
One would hope, eh?
How do we even know that it was the Russians? How do we know that it isn't just that someone in another party blaming the Russians to cover up?
It happens.
You never know.
No,
I remember seeing
United States, isn't it?
I remember seeing those Russian spend numbers, but they look very tiny compared to what actually Trump, or I think Trump spent twice as Hillary, something like this. I don't remember, but those Russian ads and they seem very little spent compared to what the campaigner actually spent. So
that was the Google figures. If I remember right, you Google. There were ads that ran, but they were like 0.03 of the ads that ran during the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too, Fab, is it's not. Let's say 100 Russian bots or Russian operators put up controversial fake news posts. Okay, that's not 100 posts. That's probably 50 million or 100 million people that are going to see those posts, between sharing and liking and everybody's feeds being fed to their friends. So that 100 posts turns into a lot of crap real quick. And like Terry says, if people are that stupid, well, I think evidence pretty well takes the if out of that statement, Terry. People are that fucking stupid.
You know what?
Wait a minute, Doc. You're saying that people are stupid because they voted differently from you.
No, I'm saying people are stupid because they let somebody else tell them how to vote.
I don't think this would be nearly as big an issue if the other candidate had won, frankly.
I would still have as big a problem with anybody. In fact, I got in a little bit of a discussion with a friend on Facebook just a couple of days ago who said that I think you should vote a straight Democratic ticket this next time around because, we need to get this crap stopped. Well, I agree on that we need to get this crap stopped part. But anybody that is stupid enough to go vote a straight ticket for any party, I wouldn't vote a straight ticket for the goddamn Pope. I decide what candidate and what issue I want to vote yes or no on. I'm not going to let some unseen guy who absolutely has an agenda that's got 9 zeros in front of it, okay, decide how I should vote. That to me is the height of stupidity. You're abdicating your vote to somebody else who has an agenda.
You know how hey Doc, you know how they spend 130 million on Facebook? $6 a time boosting the fake.
Yeah. Well, Facebook ads are cheap. That's true.
That's the only way you reach an audience there, isn't it?
So everybody in this conversation who thinks that the United States doesn't do exactly the same thing in other elections should go meet in the first phone booth on the left in Bonsall tonight at 7 p.m. There will be a lot of room.
Oh, we're no saints, that's for sure.
You know we do the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. So I'm probably politically very different from almost all of my friends in the tech world. And, to be honest, I just choose not to engage anymore because tempers really flare and sentiments run really high. And it's just frankly not worth it to me because I like all you guys. I do.
Well, if you really knew us, though, Tim.
Well, yeah, there is that. I don't know. It's kind of funny. This reminds me a lot of when I first went to work in Silicon Valley, having moved there from San Diego County. It was a very different world.
Very politically different, yeah.
And actually, it wasn't just my experience in the tech world. My wife, who had started her master's in social work at San Diego State, walked into the School of Social Work at San Jose State, where she had already applied for a transfer, and presented her documents there at the reception counter at the School of Social Work. And the student who was there on desk duty looked at her and she said to her, "Wait a minute, what? You're white."
You're observant.
It's like nobody transfers here. It's just, I don't know. We live in such a weird world these days, guys. It really is.
People seem to think that it's okay because it's so damn easy to let others do your thinking for you.
Well, there is that.
And I don't understand that. I just, why did it suddenly become so unpopular to have an opinion that was actually original in your own? And it just seems that's so much now the exception rather than the rule.
I don't know, Doc, but hasn't marriage depended on that principle for at least 50 years? Having somebody else to blame for every mistake made. I let them decide. That way it's their fault.
Hey, Ammon, I don't know. Maybe it's just because my hearing is shot, but I'm having a hard time understanding you today. Are you using a new mic setup?
I'll have a look at the setup.
Anybody else having the same problem?
A little bit garbled on occasion.
Yeah.
Might be a bandwidth thing.
It could be. I admit my hearing is like awful. Well, I chased Ammon away, apparently.
I'm just checking all the settings now.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Could just be that accent. You never know.
Wait, Ammon's got an accent?
No, we all do, I think.
Ammon has an accent?
Pretty there.
Anyway. Yeah, I haven't really had a sound check since I moved the desk around and stuff. So it could well be that because the setup's changed, I need to change position a bit.
Hearing a little bit of feedback. Are you on your speakers or are you a headset, Ammon?
At the moment, I'm on speaker. Hold on.
I think your mic may be picking your.
Might be. Yeah. No, I'm on headset. Do I sound clear to everybody?
You sound clear.
Okay, good. I think of all of us, Doc, you're the clearest. You've got a pretty nice setup there.
Good to hear. Wasn't always that way. I went through about 4 mics before I finally managed to get myself out of the barrel. Yeah, I think that Facebook has got a real challenge in front of them. It's not just Facebook. They're getting a lot of the focus right now because so much of the fake news is circulating there. But it's not Facebook alone by any means, and I think that it's a real challenge. When you've got a platform or a number of platforms, a society basically where any one of us can go and say anything we want to. I saw this guy trying to abduct a 5-year-old boy. There are people that will take it for gospel, and that's a problem.
I found out what the problem is. It's using a different mic.
Oh, okay. Oh, now you sound pretty good.
Yeah, I'm using one of the other mics, but it's still not my usual mic.
Oh, this is better.
That sounds better, yeah.
Thanks. We have the same challenge really with Facebook that I think you have with any public venue or platform. What's the balance between freedom of speech and controlling speech? And if people can't make their own assessment and use their own judgment and wisdom to discern what to listen to and what not to, then somebody wants to step in always and control it, and then basically freedom of speech gets squelched. It's a tricky thing. It really is.
We've had censorship in every other media for as long as we can remember. There's a board of film censors. There's a board of TV censors.
That's true.
Radio is subject to watchdogs. Newspapers are subject to watchdogs. So it's simply that the internet is so big and it's so multi-jurisdictional, they don't know what to do with it.
Although I think what we're hearing or what we're talking about in this case is slightly different. Maybe I'm off on this, but censorship in radio and TV and all that, and maybe in other formats too, in the United States anyway, mostly in the past, I think was about, or at least overt censorship was about language and cursing and
profanity and vulgarity.
Whereas here we're not talking about that. We're talking about political views and misstatements of facts or alleged misstatements of facts. And it's a little bit different.
I'm not so sure because, well, let's take some American censorship. There's a writer called Marion Zimmer Bradley, wrote wonderful fiction, the Darkover series, completely banned because it actually described homosexual sex, particularly women on women, and that got it banned. Lady Chatterley's Lover was a book which was banned because it suggested infidelity.
Banned in which country?
Well, that was banned here.
Okay.
It's something that basically only intellectuals read Shakespeare, or Shakespeare would have been banned.
So that's a fair point. It's not just morality in terms of speech; it's also in terms of actions or whatever that was also censored in the past. Imposing morality, basically.
Yeah.
There's actually, at the time of the Facebook hearing, probably sooner than that, it was actually end of March 2018. I watched, basically there was a committee by the Singapore government about online falsehood. And it was actually to me, it seems a little bit more serious than the US one. And like they took session to go in detail, not just Facebook. There was Google, Twitter, a committee of probably publisher in Asia. And they, I don't know, I watched a bit of YouTube, it's on YouTube, but it looks like they took the subject quite seriously in terms of like how any kind of platform could influence both the Singapore regulation, but also, you know, the rules of society that they had there. And it's interesting, like how like not all countries are probably well equipped to discuss this stuff, right? You might have politicians and like committees that are a bit like not prepared, or otherwise maybe they're just behind in caring about this subject. And then it's probably about time that all countries they you know, if your entire population is online, you should figure out what's going on and have a view and then regulate accordingly. Because I guess that like similarly to, you know, other industries is about regulation as well. If the government doesn't speak with the bigger players in figuring out what regulation to build, and they don't build something that makes sense, there will always be, you know, fuck ups. And
the other thing too is which doesn't really have to do with false news, but it just drives me nuts when I hear in the U.S. somebody on Facebook or in the blog comments or on a YouTube comment thread talking about freedom of speech. You know, you have no First Amendment rights on somebody else's platform. The First Amendment deals with the government not abridging your rights, not dealing with me abridging your rights to comment on my blog, okay, or in my paper or on my radio show. And it just seems like 9 times out of 10, the people think that their First Amendment rights apply, that they can say anything they want to anybody on the street and not get their teeth knocked down their throat. You can say it, but there's a consequence. The government can't tell you can't say it. That 75-pound heavier than you quarterback can, okay?
So Doc, is there an exception to what you just said, though, when a platform is so huge that it becomes a monopoly?
Like no, I don't think there is. I don't think there is. It doesn't.
Or Google.
Does it suddenly become a publicly owned platform simply because they've been tremendously successful? No.
Even with private platforms, the freedom of speech is the freedom to say it. It's to say that nobody can gag you. It doesn't mean that you can't be done for treason. It doesn't mean you can't be done for sedition. It doesn't mean that you're immune from libel and slander. It's the freedom to get yourself into trouble. Nobody is allowed to stop you speaking, but they are allowed to judge you on it.
Well, but in the U.S., we're talking about a constitutional right under the First Amendment that specifically says the government may not abridge your right to freedom of speech. Doesn't say that somebody else can. It doesn't say that your employer, for instance, can fire you because you spoke out in favor of this political party or issue. If the company says that this guy being a gay rights activist, for example, is not what we want as part of an image for our Bible manufacturing company, okay, they have the right to do that. Now, you have the right to contest it, and possibly the courts will support you, but not under the First Amendment. It has nothing to do with that constitutional right. It would be strictly a matter of labor law. Did they give you the proper warning or attempt to remedy the situation, or was it an unlawful termination? It has nothing to do with your First Amendment rights. That's what I'm talking about.
Could be a civil rights issue too.
I'm sorry?
It could be a civil rights issue.
Sure, but again, yeah. You know, I can shoot my mouth off to Terry, and he cannot abridge my First Amendment rights. He can mash my teeth down my throat, or ban me from his website, but he's not capable. He doesn't have the power to exercise, or to disobey the First Amendment, because that First Amendment only applies to the government.
Do you remember the Search King litigation?
Which one?
Search King.
Oh, yeah.
Where they were suing Google because Google reduced their page rank.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And Google won a judgment which basically said that Google's search results were an opinion and therefore protected under the First Amendment.
Yeah, that was about the same time that a corporation was given basically human rights in the U.S., which I thought was, well, the second stupidest thing I'd ever heard. The first one being our present president.
Now.
Well, technically, the whole thing of the laws of corporation are to be able to treat businesses as persons,
A legal entity.
in legal senses.
There are a few limitations on that from a practical standpoint, but
Yep.
yeah, Ammon, yeah. So I guess the reason I'm sort of poking to bear here a little bit, Doc, believe me, I understand the point you're making about the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and I'm kind of at the same time thinking about, I'm hearing more and more talk of litigation against Google in terms of its ranking and its favoring its own properties and things like that, versus and I'm also thinking, what if Facebook, it's an even bigger thing, I think, than Google, I'm not sure, but what if Facebook said, we've decided that politically we believe a certain way. Let's say that they decided they were going to be completely conservative all of a sudden. And so they weren't going to permit any sort of liberal political expression of opinion. I don't know. There's such a monopoly that I think in the United States anyway, there'd be a lot of sentiment to try to prevent them from utilizing that monopoly power.
There would be a lot of pushback, no doubt, and I would not even hazard a guess as if it goes to court, how the court would rule on that, because from a legal standpoint, as a layperson, I just don't feel like any. You remember the situation with the bakery that the gay couple wanted a cake for their wedding. Okay,
that's why I brought up civil rights. Yeah,
I don't feel like anybody has the right to force a business owner to offer as basically they attack it as though it was a civil rights issue. Okay,
we have an example even closer to home than that, Doc. There's a doctor in Vista, California, Charles Stupak. He and his partner were successfully sued and lost like hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties or damages to a lesbian couple to whom they denied some sort of procedure so that one of them could have a child. And it was on religious grounds. They thought that was the wrong thing. They lost.
The doctor lost.
Actually it was a medical partnership. They lost. They went up to the California Supreme Court on that one.
Well, they deserve to, because all they had to do is say we're full up. They didn't want to bring the gay thing into it at all. That's judging people. That's bullshit.
Actually, they offered to pay for, I forget, well, and you know what, I could be mistaken about that. But basically, they said, this is our personal belief. We don't think it's the right thing for us to do. But there's lots of other, OBGYN doctors around that would do this. And
but why even say that? That's like judging them and saying, you can't do this.
Terry, I get the point.
Tell them you're full up and move on. Like there's no need for that.
Terry, you're talking about a practical way out of the problem for them?
Well, no, that's like what. It's just not right to judge people on those bases. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything, but it just hurts me.
No, it's a very fair point. So the solution that you're suggesting is one which would have worked from a practical standpoint.
Well, no, they deserve to get sued because what they did to that person was unneeded. They deserve to get sued.
The same thing
Because
as
they
the
judged
wedding
them
cake.
when they didn't need to.
Well, I think the point, though, Terry, is that couple, one could say that couple deserved to have this operation available to them, you know? So I understand. I don't necessarily disagree with you. You know, it wasn't the smart way to approach the issue. If their desired end was to not give this treatment, they could have been a lot smarter about how they denied them the treatment. Okay,
Well,
Yeah,
but
I think Terry's saying that that's not the issue, though, for him.
I understand. But
for me, it's just the judgment. Like
but I
I've
think yeah,
been there.
they
I
were
know what
judging the
that
couple.
feels like. I would like, to me, that's like those kind of people.
So
I
Terry,
have no use for them. Like I wish they would have fined them $1 million. Like
so the
there's
case that
not enough money.
So the case that Doc was bringing up earlier was a wedding cake bakery in someplace in the South, right? Or
I don't recall where it was. To tell you the truth.
anyway, and they declined to make a wedding cake for I forget, was it a lesbian
No,
couple? Or?
it was two gay guys.
Okay,
Well,
same basis, religious beliefs, and they also were sued. So Terry, would you say that again was a good decision, that they were held accountable for declining to create a wedding cake for that couple?
They didn't even need, like,
That's not
here's what I don't understand, right? Like, why make anyone feel like that? Why judge people like that? You deserve to get, that's not right. So, it would, no matter what it is, judging people, you don't need to judge them. You can just move along, right? I do that sometimes, but I'm talking about people in general. I'd never do it to a person one-on-one unless I thought it would help them. And then I would come back around, but they wouldn't feel like they should sue me. Just the right way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't like to see that sort of judgment
Any
either.
of it, Doc. I just don't like to see people judged based on, like how someone else's feel.
So if I had a
their
domain,
problem, someone else's.
So
if I had a domain that listed SEOs, I really shouldn't not list somebody just because they practice in a way I don't like them. Is that the kind of thing you're saying, Terry? Just because you disagree with the way they practice SEO, should you still have to list them? Or should you have the right to deny a listing to whoever you like?
I'm not judging them as people. I'm judging their work. That's different. Just not hooking them up with other people. And on top of that, Ammon, everybody that got turned down also got help. And I helped lots of people join by showing them what they were doing wrong.
Yeah, I'm just illustrating the point that I think.
Yeah, it seems hypocritical what I'm saying. Right?
Personally, I think businesses should be able to turn down anyone they want. I don't think any business should be forced to serve everyone. If that's not what they want to do. But
that wasn't. Just so I'm clear, I'm not upset. It doesn't bother me that they refuse them. The way they refuse them was demeaning, in my opinion. So anything that happens to them, they deserve.
Would it change your opinion, Terry? And we're friends here, so I'm poking the bear a little bit. But would it change your opinion if you knew that, at least in the case of the lesbian couple, because I know some of the inside baseball on this one, that they selected that medical group to challenge them because they knew that they would get.
Well, that's different. That if that was the case, then probably it's a reverse then, because
So how do you ever know?
There are people.
Well, the other thing to think about too is, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, there are people who forum shop, who do target specific groups to litigate against, to raise a point.
There are large organizations that promote that.
It's like fishing in a barrel. It's the ideal litigator. The
Yep.
defendant is the one you want to sue.
Yep.
They're the one you're going to win against.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about too, now what
I turn people down. I was never really ignorant about it. You ask, lots of people, they'll tell you. It was never let's say I didn't do it Doug Hiles style.
Let's face it, those kind of decisions are always so hard to rule on. It's like, peace protesters chaining themselves up to railings and stop people going around their normal jobs. Or, fox hunters who put themselves and members of the hunt and animals in danger to make their point. I think to an extent, the ideal would be that everyone could be heard in court and a judge would make a ruling. But that gets ridiculously expensive and ridiculously difficult when the courts are already queued up. And so compromises have to be made. And I do think that's a shame. I do think that more cases should get to court, but I also think the courts could be streamlined a little so that things went through a little bit quicker.
If you ask a chancellor in the Delaware Court of Chancery, the purpose for litigation is to make both sides unhappy.
No, but that may be true, but there's a third side. That's the lawyers. They always end up winning, right? So,
I have real mixed emotions on this thing because on the one hand, I think, if I invest and build my business, I should be allowed to run my business the way I want to. Mm-hmm. I should not be required to take action that, for instance, supports gay weddings, gay marriage, if I have firm commitments against that. On the other hand, take the other side of this. What if they weren't turning them down because they were gay? What if they were turning them down because they were black? What if they were turning them down because they were Baptist? Okay. Now, at some point, there does need to be some protection. Now,
maybe they were turning them down because they were getting married. They only like to do birthday cakes.
Well, I mean, what if they were black and gay and Baptist? Target.
So now we get back to censorship, because in a way that's a form of censorship.
If I do this, if I refuse to sell you a cake because you're black, that's racism. Okay.
Well, okay, so now you saying that that's wrong and it's because it's racism means that you are asserting some moral judgment over. And by the way, don't take my position literally. But if you think about it, that still is asserting some morality that everybody should buy into, and that's a form of censorship. Now, it might be a great form of censorship. Don't get me wrong, but
which is precisely why, Tim, I say I'm kind of.
You're torn.
Betwixt and between.
Yeah, you're torn.
At some point, the business. If the business is mine, why does this guy who walks in off the street get to dictate to a degree, or why does the court get to dictate to a degree? For instance, if I decide to keep my business open 7 days a week, yet my municipality says no, it is illegal for a business to be open on Sunday. Yeah. Because they happen to be religious driven. To me, that is a very clear violation of my rights as a business owner. Okay. But by the same time, my rights as a business owner certainly shouldn't allow me to throw you out of my shop simply because I don't like the color of your skin.
It's very, very difficult, though, isn't it? Because again, it comes under that freedom of speech thing where people misunderstand these laws a lot of the time. Is it wrong to be racist? Yes. Does that mean as a black person, I have the right to enter your house and you can't refuse me on the grounds that I'm black? If your own house, you decide you just do not want any black friends in there, isn't that your right? Or is that racism and therefore they can go to court and win the right to enter your house?
I happen to be in support of the other important amendment, the ownership of firearms. So you're certainly welcome to try to enter my house. And believe me, the color of your skin will not enter into it. It'll just might make you a little bit more visible in dim daylight.
But you see what I mean? All of these things get to a point. It's the trickiest thing in the world is to determine where one person's freedom to do something is impinging too much on somebody else's right to be without that thing, to not have that thing happening around them.
It can be a very difficult call at times, and you know, that's one of the reasons that I have such a problem with people making absolute statements. You know, this is always the way that this should go.
Yeah.
There are rarely to be found situations in which there aren't exceptions.
Exactly. One man's freedom of speech always impinges on someone else's right to silence, to enjoy silence.
And,
this is the thing. All of the laws we have are to try and find a balance between those two, ultimately, those 2 points that cannot quite ever meet. You have to find boundaries where one wins and boundaries where another one wins in an attempt to find a fair place. But at the end of the day, one person's freedom always comes at the cost of someone else's. And you try to find the balance point at which the most people have the most freedom and the least people are really put into an uncomfortable position.
You know, I had a good friend who's a circuit court judge here in Southern California, and said that she had to make decisions many times that she knew were going to hurt people.
Yeah.
And you often just have to say, okay, who is going to hurt the fewest people in the long run? You know, what decision should be rendered to minimize the hurt?
Yeah.
Both, not just in this case today, but also in the long term, in the future. You know, and I think that's a sucky job when you know that you're going to have to make decisions like that. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray in there.
Unfortunately, you know, to a large extent, anyone invested in the web is, especially in the content game, is at some point going to have to make, you know, decisions over what you can and cannot say, what one person really wants to put out as a message. Is it fair to everyone? There are some tough calls to be made in future. You know, Facebook want to accept advertisers. Should they accept all advertisers? Does that mean, you know, if they object to one person on their political view, shouldn't they reject all political views because one person's is as good as another? You've got to have a different standard where you say, well, okay, it's okay to have political ads, but it's always got to be a true message. Well, good luck there. That'll rule out all the actual parties. It could be you're not allowed to speak of any other political candidate. You know, you can talk about your own case, but you cannot down or disparage any other political figure.
I could be in support of that.
I think
but they tend to be such ideal targets.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they don't infringe upon my right to badmouth our current president, I have no problem with a little sentence. Telling the judge, but he needed killing, Your Honor. This guy needs to be disparaged.
Yeah, it's a tough call. And
it is.
At some point, I think any of us in the publishing business have to make some of these tough calls because we are ahead of the law by a number of years. It will take decades for the law to really catch up with where we are now, never mind where we'll be by the time it has caught up.
And that's assuming that we don't do it incorrectly and have to backstep and correct it 3 or 4 times, which is dreaming.
Well, look at something like AdWords, right? You're paying people for the ability to put ads on their site. Okay. There's a thing called a minimum wage. If somebody was solely a webmaster, shouldn't Google actually be paying them a minimum wage if they're making a full-time job of putting up AdWords? These things get really tricky, and technically somebody could take that to court and maybe make a case out of it. Certainly it was a thing we faced years ago when I was dealing with a user-generated content site that paid its writers. We had to stipulate, this is a hobby. The payments are nominal. This is not a job. Therefore, it doesn't have a wage. But it was kind of tricky when that law first came in because people hadn't tested it yet. And we didn't know exactly what a minimum wage would and would not apply to. And I think there's some cases where that may still be a little bit fuzzy today.
Mm-hmm. And you thought you were capable of contracting around that requirement?
It's what I'm saying is I think all webmasters have to make some tough decisions sometimes as to where they think the law falls on something. And that may be as simple as deciding, let's face it, one we've all looked at, cookie policies. It may be looking at the European judgment on the right to forget and thinking, do I have to take negative stories down from my blog at a certain point? Is Google delisting it enough, or is the spirit of that law that all publishers should eventually forget?
Yeah, you speak about Google like that, which reminds me, last week they came out with just because we have a patent doesn't mean we're using it line about something I wrote. And I enjoy when they do that because it shows me that they can be petty too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is an important distinction. I think, let's face it, the reason we get upset is because we already know that. And we're talking about it as a hypothetical and because it's still something Google put time into, not only researching, but then writing and creating a patent for. So it's interesting, even if it was a detour on the route to where they've actually gone, not an essential part of that journey, not any part of the actual working algorithm, it's still fair comment for us to look at it and look at the way they approached that particular thing in order to determine how they might approach and look at other things.
The legal protections they're granted by publishing a patent to exclude others from using the same process.
Yep.
They're paying for by publishing information about their patent and sharing it with people. And if people talk about it, that's not harmful. It's actually encouraging it because it shows how people are solving problems and inspires people to innovate, to try new things.
Exactly. If people weren't allowed to speculate on patents, Google would never have been able to rip off Trust Rank from Yahoo. Oh, sorry, no, they created their own version entirely, didn't they?
Yeah, sort of. So, and PageRank, tell me that Google didn't succeed brilliantly on the back of an algorithm, a patent, which distinguished them from AltaVista and Excite and many others. I mean, if they didn't talk about PageRank, and some of them now say negative things about PageRank, it's like we do other things too, other than just PageRank. But it is the thing that made them stand out.
Yes and no. I think to the masses that's very true. I think to people like you and me, it was actually their infrastructure and technology more than anything. I mean, back when they started, cluster networking was not widely done, and it's what made them so fast and so responsive and able to do a lot of the things that they did algorithmically in the first place, is because they weren't dependent on the traditional server farm of the big box servers that, cost several million a pop. The company I was working for back in 99, we went up from 5 to 6 servers, and it was an extra €1 million, half of which was kind of actual physical costs and half of which was the licenses for the various software that needed to run on the server to make it more than a dumb box. Google's approach was very different, and a lot of the things they were able to do were because of that difference. So, I mean, if I'm looking at one thing that actually set Google apart, it's not PageRank, it's the infrastructure, their own operating system, the way they were able to roll things out. Nowadays, we take the cloud for granted, but Google invented that effectively.
Yeah, cluster processing was brilliant, and it was probably the single most impactful thing that they did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to go to the scale that they achieved.
But this is it. Jeff Dean is an absolute legend, not just for his work with Google, but in what he has taught generally, what he has enabled generally, all the things he has advised on, and other uses for clustering, and the stuff he's published and shared in that regard is phenomenal. And
right, I would suggest people find the paper about the algorithm Spanner, which describes how they run data centers as if they're desktop computers.
I was actually checking Wikipedia, and I was reading about Spanner. Bill has got got a quicker link than me.
I remember things I read.
Living version of Wikipedia.
Yep. We do call him Bill Sloskypedia.
So there are 26 authors on the Spanner paper, including Jeff Dean. So he played a role in that one too.
Yeah. He has played at least an advisory or consultancy role in so many projects. He's not even named in everything he's helped with, let's face it, because sometimes it's literally a conversation around the water cooler. But I don't think we would be anywhere with this kind of technology without him, or at least we would be about a decade further back. It's not all him now, but so many of the people that are champions of it began by him being their champion back in the day.
Mm-hmm. I do spend a lot of time reading patents, and if you look Jeff Dean up in the patent office,
pages and pages and pages.
He's done quite a few for Google. They talk about core aspects of how the search engine works,
mm-hmm.
and how a website's crawled, how anchor text is indexed, the caffeine description of how web pages are incrementally indexed and updated. I don't think most people realize they get indexed when you add new content to the page. It's just new content that gets added.
Yeah. And so much of search engines in the past, some very interesting decisions were actually created around things like how much time was involved. I remember back in the day, Yahoo did a deal with Overture for its pay-per-click. And a lot of people said, well, in Europe, why using Overture rather than e-spotting? Didn't they do a superior bid? Oh, sorry, actually, they went with e-spotting rather than Overture, sorry. And, it was, hang on, didn't the others bid more? And it was, what was the deciding factor? And I found out what the deciding factor was. 0.2 milliseconds. That was the deciding factor. That was the difference in speed between pulling data from one over pulling data from the other.
Wait a second. Are you saying that Google ripped Overture off and they should have ripped somebody else off?
No. I'm saying that Yahoo made a decision to serve search results from e-spotting rather than Overture, even though Overture had more advertisers, had made a superior bid because of 0.2 milliseconds.
Wow.
It wasn't.
And it's why I was asking why Google ripped off Overture instead of e-spotting.
Because Overture had it long before e-spotting was around. So if you're going to accuse them of copying somebody, you may as well copy the one that everyone copied rather than copy the copier.
Okay. That makes sense.
When you're complaining of plagiarism, you always look at the original author, not the plagiarist. The plagiarist doesn't mind the plagiarist.
Well, Yahoo still does own lots of Google stock.
Yahoo is doing very well on its Google stocks, yes.
Yeah.
But then again, I've got a funny feeling Matt Cutts owns almost as much of Google as Yahoo does, because being one of the first 10. Certainly, if he took his stock options, you know, that Matt Cutts is Yahoo, you know, with a lot less mouths to feed.
So we're going to start calling him the Yahoo guy?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Somebody ought to let him know this.
Yeah. Well, who was that Bing guy? Oh, everyone's forgotten him already. Sorry, Dwayne.
Dwayne Forster? Yeah.
Yeah. If only Dwayne had shares in Bing, eh? Shares in Microsoft. To the extent that we believe Matt has shares in Google. It's a tough decision that search engines make. I think a lot of decisions at Google have to be made based on time. What time does this take? What time? When you look at how many different databases, different data sources Google is polling and bringing in and combining, then every single millisecond of that must be somewhere Gantt charted, and there must be decisions made at times. Okay, here's the cutoff point, because anything else will take too long. And I think some of the polling of shards and things like that, it's not that they necessarily pull every piece of information you want, but they've pulled as much as they can without slowing their results beyond the point they've set. And I think things like the site command, some of these things are not disappearing to hide information from webmasters, but simply because over time, the way Google stores data, as data has got larger and larger, has had to change, and Google have to pull parts of it that they can get within a time rather than being able to pull all of it.
So the site command, the site operator's always been an estimate.
Once upon a time, you used to do the site colon, you used to get pretty much everything. When that first came out, you got pretty much everything. Links, no, it was only a certain number. But site used to be pretty damn reliable.
Right, but now it's an estimate of a much larger database.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think some of those kinds of decisions are nothing to do with obfuscation and keeping data from webmasters, which is, of course, the common refrain. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that is about how the data is stored, how many different sources you would have to pull from now to get that complete information, and whether or not it falls within the time limits that Google have for certain data sources.
Which brings up a question, you know, and I'm not really conversant in clustering, but I would assume that since they have said that when they index a large site, portions of that site may be indexed in this center and portions of it may be stored in another center.
Yeah.
Okay. So at some point, this tells me, you know, if this was my desktop, obviously, at some point I need to do a defrag, because as things get moved around, it's going to get scattered even more so, and it'll be more efficient if I defrag. Would the same be true of a cluster system? I would assume.
You would hope so, wouldn't you? And there's also the factor of the shards. There's a certain amount of duplication. The amount of duplication is on an algorithm which estimates how likely it is that they'll need that information. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it gets tough, because at the end of the day, Google wants a certain amount of redundancy. If one piece of hardware goes down, the system doesn't fail. That was the entire point of cluster networking. At any one time in their data centers years ago, anything up to 10% of all the boards in that room might not be working. But it didn't matter. There were just so damn many of them that were working. It was fine. You know, they went through every now and again and cleaned out the broken ones and replaced them. There was redundancy built in. And I think that's only going to have increased and widened as time goes on. And I'm sure that the shards have an amount of redundancy built in.
They're talking about machines with GPUs, graphic processing units, in them now, as opposed to having lots of disposable, replaceable RAM.
Yeah. Partly that's to do with machine learning. When you're dealing with machine learning, the number of cores you have is the limitation rather than the sheer power of a few cores. It's the lateral thinking, so to speak. And GPUs have thousands of cores rather than quad cores and hex cores and even 16 cores that you can get for some servers. So yeah, those have become very, very hot stuff. For a while, Google was pretty much buying up all the graphic processors it could, along with a lot of other people working with machine learning. For machine learning, that's still very true. But Google still have lots of uses for regular boards, and they have lots of room still for using RAM because, you know, the needs of Gmail and cloud hosting haven't gone away. So somewhere there has to be storage.
Guys, talking about processing time, and time is 9:20, and I'm still in the office. I think we
Yeah, we should wrap it up.
we can abandon and we can probably speak next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah. We've gone past time.
Yeah.
Take care, Fab.
Bye-bye.
Fab. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we ought to round up there. We kind of asked what everyone was up to at the start. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. And take care. Catch us next time.
Thank you.
Good.
Take
You
care.
guys take care. Have a great day.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.
We'll see you, Ammon.
Take care, but